round 2 of Battlegrounds.
The officers who have these kind of dirty records are able to bounce around to other jurisdictions where they can become a cop from one jurisdiction.
So they've allowed the power to essentially make them feel like they're above the people they're supposed to be serving.
I got a real quick question. Me and Chef were speaking earlier about the possibility of a federal mandate about training and or body cameras. He said that it would be highly unlikely for that to be possible. How reasonable do you think that is to have a bare baseline amount of training um, and or body cameras for a federal mandate nationwide?
No, I never said it was highly unlikely. What I did was I stated that it was a mountain that they would have to go over, get around, or go through. When you're passing federal mandate, when you have, even in the state of Georgia, you have several hundred counties. You know, that's why there's laws that's different. Certain things are legal in one state as the other. So what I was speaking to was not highly unlikely, but the amount of obstacles to have to forego in order to get that to happen. You know what I mean? That's just my clarification.
Man, you good. Man, this country can't even vote to keep its citizens alive, right? That's the country we're in. We're in a country that can't pass a vote to help keep their own people alive. You know, the reality is that there will never be a federal mandate. I'm gonna tell you how the feds work, though, in reference to pushing type of policies for police departments. What the feds do, because the feds and states are separated, so the feds don't have any jurisdiction over the states. The states can't make any laws. The states can't make any laws that infringe on federal constitutional law, right? But so what do? Since they have no power over the states, what the feds do in a lot of other areas, which is why a lot of people have an issue with them just in general, is they use money as a way to control the states. So the states are like, well, our schools are doing bad on the state level. Where the feds say, well, if you teach this curriculum, we'll give you some money, right? So it works the same way in the police department. So there's what we call a CALEA standard. And so there's like a certain standard that the feds say, if you do this and you have this level of transparency, you do this the way we wanted to do it, we'll give you funding, we'll give you federal funding. That's per police department that's responsible for, if you want to get this certification, then we will give you funding in exchange for maintaining this level of standard. It is a higher standard. So when you have a police department that meets these standards, the feds will kick you some money, but you got to go by their rules. And so I work for a department that was, that had those standards and certifications. And so they held us accountable. There's certain things that department cannot do when, open records, timely information, disciplinary and all that kind of stuff. The problem with the feds, Biden signed over a package of police reform, and it was, I can't remember how much. I think it was like 20 billion, I think, or something, or 20 million. I think it was billions. It was
something. I put what you were talking about on the screen for you too, CALEA standards.
There you go. I appreciate it. Right on time, brother. Right on time. And yeah, law enforcement accreditation. And so high standards right there, they request a lot. And if you maintain it, you get the check. And not every department wants to do it because they don't want the people in their business. You have some police departments, unfortunately, that are it's not that they're corrupt. They are, I guess it's a form of corruption. They've allowed the power to essentially make them feel like they're above the people they're supposed to be serving. One could argue that that's a form of corruption. You're corrupt. You're no longer maintaining or you're no longer operating under the principles that you were designed to operate under. And so the moment you start to deviate from that, that is a form of being tainted, and I would say that's a form of corruption. And so there are departments that they don't want transparency, they don't want body cameras at all, and they're very clear on it. And you can't force them to do it. The feds can't force the states to do anything. The states have to do it, which then leans back onto us as individuals, as a people. We are responsible for holding politicians accountable for addressing the things that we want done in our communities. Police reform has to be done on a state level. Absolutely. The feds won't be able to do anything about a damn thing. And so, but if you want to understand what you should be asking from, our politicians and our leaders, those are the things that I talk about on my channel, because I know, just like Chef knows, that that there's no way the feds are going to, they can't enforce anything on the states, just plain and simple, they can't. And so when you have states like Texas, where they're stubborn as hell, they do what they want to do, Florida, a lot of these conservative states, you're not going to tell them a damn thing. And
Montana, Oregon.
Yeah, you're not telling them nothing. And they move like that. Their police department moves like that because from the governor all the way down, the highest level of government, and just throughout the chains of government, they move with a lot of ego. And so you're not going to march in there and tell them a damn thing, especially the federal government. They have a dislike for the federal government. And so, at one point in time, you heard Texas talking about they were going to break away during the riots and stuff. They reckless. And so what you can do has to be done on a state level. The politicians you have to force the politicians to address your needs as a people. That's how it works. Outside of that, nothing's getting done. To be completely honest with you, there needs to be, to your point though, there needs to be a universal training standard for all police departments. I do agree with that. Every department should have body cameras. Absolutely. I feel like at this stage in the game, if you don't have body cameras, I feel like you shouldn't be allowed to police. Because unfortunately, policing, the profession, has broken so much trust with the people, just in general, that at this point, it should be mandatory for officers to carry cameras, to have cameras and record every single citizen interaction, period. I think that is a mandatory thing, that I have it in my police reform package that I'm presenting. But all the states here, all the departments here in Georgia, the majority of them here, the major ones, all have body cameras. And so I would make it a felony for officers to turn off their body cameras in interactions with the citizen, because I would look at that as tampering and destroying of evidence. Especially if something questionable came out about it, I would, that should be grounds for immediate termination. So these are the type of things you put into place. And someone mentioned qualified immunity earlier, I think I saw something about that. The problem with qualified immunity is it's not something that officers have alone. You have judges, you have other political employees, politicians that have it, and you get rid of it for police, you're gonna have to get rid of it for everybody. And I think that's the reason why they're not going to get rid of it for police. And in reference to qualified immunity, I think people have a misunderstanding of what it's about. It's in reference to civil officers being sued civilly. So it's not anything criminally. It's civil, and an officer being sued civilly, I think is kind of defeats the purpose, because the officers don't have any money. So you're going to sue the police department anyways.
You're right about that. The only way you can change the qualified immunity, you have to go through the Supreme Court. You've got to petition. This is on the federal level. You're absolutely right about that. And you're right. If I'm not mistaken, Brother Nathan, do police departments have what they call insurance? Because I've heard that, I know out there in Ferguson, I think that cop that shot the young man down there, Brown, Darren, he actually worked in another police department out there, if I'm not mistaken, that went defunct. And a lot of times some of the officers who have these kind of dirty records are able to bounce around to other jurisdictions where they can become a cop from one jurisdiction where maybe their police department got defunct. And I remember the late Johnny Cochran saying that you should really go after suing the police departments based on their insurance. That if they start getting hit in the pocket economically, that would probably be more effective in terms of making the loudest noise towards cops stopping what they're doing because they're getting lose their accreditations. I don't know if that's possible or still possible. That's one, is that possible?
No, because I mean that's what they've been doing all the time. Police departments settle all the time. You're talking about billions of dollars a year are wasted on officers who are failing at their job. And in some departments, I've had situations where I know officers that even at my last department before I retired, where it's a situation where an officer got into like a wreck, a car accident or something like that. And the officer was wrong. The person was really hurt and the department sued. So not all cases are from officers who are intentionally, in a sense, violating somebody's rights.
Yeah.
Sometimes this is simply as officers making mistakes or doing, just doing stupid stuff, not doing things by the book. Not everything is in reference to officers violating a person's constitutional rights, right? So, or wrongful deaths, but regardless, they accumulate. My thing is, and this is a pipe dream, but for the department, what I was responsible for doing was they put me in high crime areas and told me to fix the problem. And so I'm a tactician. That's what I specialize in, organizing. I guess you would say the tactics and strategies needed to reduce crime. And so what I would always present, I would present to my supervisors and command staff, I would present to them an expensive method. I would then present a non-expensive method, and then I would present to them a free method. That way ensuring that regardless of what I present, you can't deny me of an operation that I want to execute. So with that being said, when we talk about this, you brought up a good point. When you have officers that bunny hop from police department to department after they've messed up or they're no good, this is a problem. And, what do you do? What would it look like, right? The unions are an issue. What would it look like if the citizens can actually sue the unions, right, that are protecting the officers when they make the mistake? What happens is the unions feel very comfortable because they have no liability. Right. So they can push a lot of policies. They put money into the pockets of the politicians while things don't get done, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
Right. But what do you do? How do you handle it? The best thing to do, instead of worrying about the insurance of the police department, if you want to work around with qualified immunity, I tell people all the time, you'll never get rid of qualified immunity. You can't take something away from the police without replacing it with something else. And I think a lot of times people lack the imagination and we look at a situation, we just want something removed. What needs to happen, which I think is a great idea that'll work, is if you actually insured police officers individually as if they were individual contractors. So for example, myself would have to get my own insurance to carry a police license to perform the duties of law enforcement in any given state or department. That insurance is nationwide, just like my license is nationwide. So what happens as a police officer? I need to be insured to have a license and to perform the job. If I cannot perform the job properly, I lose my license. If I lose my license, I can't be insured. If I get sued for violating somebody's rights, right? Now I get sued. Say my policy is for $1 million. I have $1 million policy. I get sued, and the victim gets $300,000 from that law. Well, guess what? My insurance is like, nah, you're a liability. We're gonna drop you, right? So Allstate drops me. Then I go to Geico and I'm like, hey, can y'all insure me so I can start working again? They're like, nah, you're a liability. Guess what? That keeps me from going to another state if I can't get insured. So I believe it's the officers that need to be insured. And that way, when the officers make a mistake, you get to sue them directly instead of suing the police department. Because guess what? The police department's paying the money, but guess whose money that is, right? It's not the police department's money.
Tax dollars.
There you
Taxpayers.
go. It's the taxpayers. So
Right.
so when I come up with solutions, I look at giving people something that they can't refuse. How do I get people to vote on that? All the citizens are going to be on board because once they see how much money that's coming out of their pocket for
Mm-hmm.
lawsuits on officers who are trained poorly, right? What is that going to end up doing? Now, the department is going to be forced to ensure that their officers are trained properly, or they're not going to be insured. So you have to have it, you
Right.
got to set it up in a way to where you force everybody's hand to do their damn job.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, it's set up to where the police department doesn't care if officers are trained or not. Guess what? Because if they fuck up, someone else is going to pay for it.
Somebody else is going to pay for it.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
where is the desire to want to do better? There is none. And once you take the desire to do better out, case in point, here's a perfect example of the desire to do better. I believe we should also, when an officer is legally engaging and enforcing the law on an
Mm-hmm.
individual, on a citizen,
Mm-hmm.
and the citizen has broken the law, and that citizen resists arrest, right? And the
Right.
citizen gets hurt because of that. I believe the citizen should be unable to file a lawsuit against the police department because they violated the law themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and by them resisting arrest, they got hurt in the process. I don't believe they should be allowed to sue the department.
Okay.
And
I totally would agree with that part if
Mhm,
they were totally in violation and they
right,
were, in the midst of doing something wrong.
correct.
Um, I would agree with that.
Now let me add this caveat.
Mm-hmm.
If the citizen is stopped and it's unjust, it's unlawful,
Mm-hmm.
or the it was racially motivated, just it's unlawful in general, won't even matter after that. If it's an unlawful stop and the
Mhm.
op and the citizen resists arrest or is injured in that, the citizen should have 100% unrestricted access to sue and win because of that. And so, what does that do? It puts the citizen and the officer on notice to say, "Hey, as a citizen, if you know you're wrong and you fuck up and get hurt, it's going to be on you, and you
Mm-hmm.
can't. There's no check at the end of this rainbow." And I
Right.
think it puts the responsibility back on each individual. And so, there's a way to fix it. You just have to have solution, the right solution, and you'll see it become a domino effect of change.
Okay. I
It's a
agree
brother
with that.
clapping with a slow clap.
Yeah. What I wanted
Appreciate you, brother. Appreciate you.
another question I want to bring up to, well, this is more of, oh, what's the question? I have to agree that officers are being asked to do a lot of different things in a community. You're being asked to take on situations where you need to be a counselor. Now you're getting involved in domestic disputes, which if I'm not mistaken, tell me if I'm wrong, Brother Nate. I've heard officers say that the domestic calls can be the most dangerous calls for an officer. Is that correct or wrong?
No, that's I would say it is correct. Um, from my experience, hell, all the calls
Or
have the
yeah.
potential of being dangerous, but they say this one's the most dangerous because you're walking into unfamiliar territory, you're walking into a home. There could be weapons anywhere. There's oftentimes I've been on domestics where the woman has turned on me. The woman I'm there to protect doesn't want the boyfriend or the husband to go to jail, and that can be dangerous. I've walked into homes where there's families fighting. You don't know where the threat is coming from, and it's dangerous too because you have children around a lot of times as well, and so it can become a very volatile and unpredictable situation. So yes. Mhm.
Now, this is my last question here. Do you think, how would you, if you were a cop, if you were on duty, you're not, not retired, how would it make you feel as an officer if they did have, because I work as a therapist in mental health. How would it make you feel as an officer to have someone who works in mental health, to have certain clinicians
Yes.
that they could call out to
Mhm.
intercede in some of these situations where you have people that are having mental breakdowns, that so that it could possibly, I'm just saying, possibly take the pressure off of you as the officer to have to get involved in something physically because maybe you don't have the training or maybe the energy to deal with someone who's off the rails like that, and maybe someone who could come in who's trained could talk that person down. And then now you're not on the 10 o'clock news being reported as putting hands on this mentally ill person, where now the whole world says, hey, you did this to this mentally ill person that broke down. Because like I said earlier, they're asking cops to take on duties that for the most part you're not trained for. I mean, how do you feel about that? Maybe some people don't like that. Some people may invite that.
No, no officer, all officers are okay with that. We don't want to do those calls. You know, we don't want to do any of that stuff, to be honest. And I won't say we don't want to do it. We recognize that that's outside of our scope, right? You have some see, the difference is, to your point, what you said earlier, I'm a very compassionate person. That's me though, right? And you line me up against 20 other officers, you might get 4 more that are like me as far as being compassionate. You have other officers like, I don't care about your family drama. They walk in the house. Okay, who broke the law? Okay, you're going to jail. They don't want to hear the story. They see somebody who's cut on the forehead. Your ass is going to jail. There's nothing to talk about. I don't want to get into your family, whatever. You know, see me, I would walk into the home and I want to know how we got here. You know, I would really want to know. And I want to know I really want to know, because I'm a genuine person. The problem with policing is you don't know who you're going to get.
Yeah.
You don't know. When you call 911, you don't know who you're going to get, a person who's compassionate or a person who doesn't give a damn. You might get a white officer who's more compassionate than me, right? Or you get a white officer who seems like he's racist, but he's actually racially insensitive, right? He's looking at it like, look, I don't care about what happened 400 years ago. Okay, the law is the law, right? Like that's how some of them think. To us, some people might look at that as, oh, he's a racist. I'd be like, nah, he's not a racist. He just don't give a fuck, right? That's 2 totally different things, a different mindset. And so, but that same officer who's racially insensitive will jump in a bullet or take a bullet for a black person, right? So there's context. There's so much nuance to this because you're dealing with human nature. And you're dealing with humans in general, and we're naturally, organically flawed people. And so what I would say is a lot of officers would prefer that a lot of social issues be handled by the appropriate professionals. Because, again, we are hammers going into places that require a scalpel. And the problem is policing has become society's dumping ground for societal issues. That's not police's fault. That's the politicians and those who are running things fault, because they can do it, but they don't want to spend the money on it. So when people say defund the police, cool, we want to reallocate resources, I'm all for it. Less is more, right? If I have less officers, but I have the best quality officers, then I'm still on top anyways. I'd rather have a department, instead of having 100 officers, I'd rather have 30 and use them for the most important task that they're needed for, than to have 100 and then have damn near 80 of them not worth a damn, right?
Stay tuned for round 3 of Battlegrounds.